The man burned the gold with a lighter. Seeing that the gold was not blackened, the two men dug as hard as they could. But after digging for days, the gold was too deep to reach the bottom. For it was not a gold nugget but a huge gold mine. They tried to pull it out with their car, but the car broke down. But the gold didn't move at all. Seeing that this was not the way to go, Jack suggested that Roy should stay here and keep watch. He would go down the hill and hire a digger, but it would take at least 4 days to get to the bottom of the mountain. He wanted to make a fortune. In the end, Roy agreed. Before he left, Jack left Roy with 4 days worth of food and a walkie-talkie. Fearing that the gold nugget would be discovered, Roy rushed to bury it in the earth and set up a simple tent in a tree nearby. But despite all this, in a desert where there is no room for birds, it was still dangerous everywhere. Fearing that he might freeze to death at night, Roy gathered some branches to keep warm. He thought that would be alright, but at night the wild dogs come for him. Luckily, the fire he had lit, he made it through the night unscathed. The next day he woke up. He didn't feel safe here at all, so he found some more branches to deal with the wild dogs of the night. As he was gathering supplies with a serious face, he also saw a crashed plane on a hilltop in the middle of this vast desert. This was certainly the best place to take refuge, but because of this location, it's a long way from where Gold Hill is. He removed the plane's shell and pulled him to the nugget. After a bit of tinkering, a solid tent was built, but at night the wild dogs came again. Once again, he spent the night in fear. To make the tent stronger, he returned to the plane to look for something more. Just then a woman came from a short distance away. The woman asked him what he was doing here, but Roy didn't say anything for fear that his gold mine would be discovered. This man found a gold mine in the desert. He wants to take it for himself, but then a woman walks up not far away. Roy fears the gold will be discovered. He rushes to hide in the crashed plane, but the more he does this, the more curious the woman becomes. Seeing Roy's hesitation to speak, the woman followed the footprints and walked ahead. Sure enough, the woman spotted Gold Mountain too. She wanted Roy to give her a share, but Roy would not agree. A shovel knocked her unconscious to the ground. Roy was afraid that someone would find her. He hastily dug a hole for the woman and buried her, thinking that no one would find her. But then no one found her. Instead, a wild dog from the desert pulled her out of the earth. Roy saw this and chased the dogs away. He had the woman's body cremated. By now Roy had realized that he had become a money-obsessed monster. The next day, Roy was awakened by his companion's walkie-talkie. His companion gave him bad news. He said he was on his way to pull the excavator. The car had broken down on the road. It was expected to take another 2 days to get here. As Roy looked sad and upset, a truck suddenly came up ahead. But in order to keep his gold from being discovered, he chose to watch the truck leave. It wasn't long before Roy started picking up branches around the area again, but just then the wind suddenly picked up all around him. A huge sandstorm rolled in. Roy scrambled back to his hut for shelter, but soon the tent was easily torn apart by the sandstorm. Humans are so small in the face of nature. Fortunately, Roy survived the night's torment, but unfortunately he had a branch stuck into his body. The man's body is pierced by a branch, but he couldn't care less about the pain. Instead, he desperately searched for the golden mountain beneath the sand. For as long as he holds on to the gold, waiting for Jack to pull in the digger, he could make a fortune, 8 lifetimes of food and clothing, and in the end he managed to find the gold. He pulled the branch out of his body in excruciating pain. He quickly used the lid of a can on fire to plug the wound. By this time he had reached the limit of his physical strength. Just then, he saw in a trance, the woman he had killed appeared in front of him. After some understanding, he realized that she had come to find her sister. Seeing how Roy was about to die, the woman didn't save him but turned away, because she saw the wild dog digging a hole not far away. She knew that her sister was dead at his hands. She didn't want Roy to get better, and she didn't want him to leave alive. Roy then fell into a coma as his strength gave out. By the time he woke up again, the fire around him had almost burned down. That's when Jack's voice came over the walkie-talkie. But when Roy picked up the walkie-talkie for help, there was no sound on the radio again. Just then, a pack of wild dogs that had been hungry for 3 days slowly made their way towards him. By the time the fire had gone out, the dogs attacked him straight away. In the end, he unfortunately became the dog's dinner, and not far away on the hillside, Jack was watching Roy with his binoculars. In fact, Jack had already hired the digger. The reason he didn't show up in time was to take the gold mine for himself. He thought that if he got the excavator here, he would get all the gold. But as soon as he stepped out of the car, a bow and arrow was shot at him. At the end of the story, the sister who lost her sister managed to dig up the gold and achieves the freedom of wealth she has always dreamed of. This film tells us, don't be too greedy. Too much greed can end up with nothing.